Have you ever, stopped and really wondered what governments actually know about unidentified aerial phenomena? Or maybe thought about whether some encounters are, well, way stranger than just seeing lights in the sky? Today, we're not just scratching the surface. We're doing a proper deep dive, getting into a whole stack of fascinating sources. We'll be looking at how government policies on UAPs have shifted, digging into some frankly incredible personal stories, talking about alleged secret discoveries, and even looking at physical evidence that really challenges how we think about our skies and maybe, just maybe, what's beyond them. So our mission for you today is pretty clear. Pull out the most compelling bits, try to connect some dots between things that might seem unrelated, and basically give you a shortcut to getting up to speed on some of these really persistent mysteries around UAPs, or, what a lot of people still call UFOs. Okay, let's get into it. We're going to kick things off by looking at how different countries have tackled this whole thing. From being surprisingly open about it to years of denial and sometimes back again.
Now, when you think about official government UAP research, it might actually surprise you that Chile, a South American nation, has kind of been a quiet leader. Yeah, since way back in 1997, the Chilean government has officially run this thing called the Committee for the Study of Anomalous Aerial Phenomena, CEFI. And this isn't just some committee on paper. They actually tell air traffic control military pilots, report this stuff, report UAP activity. So what makes Chile's approach stand out here, especially compared to how others used to handle these things?
It really is a striking difference. What's amazing about Chile and CIFA is, like you said, 1997. They set up official governmental ways to report and analyze this stuff more than 2 decades ago. It wasn't just a suggestion, it became protocol. They basically institutionalized looking into UAPs, treating them like a real subject for inquiry instead of just, brushing them off. That kind of openness, that official curiosity, it was pretty much unheard of elsewhere until quite recently.
And they've definitely had things to investigate, right?
Yeah.
Like that 2014 incident. Chilean naval officers, they got this 9-minute video off the coast near Santiago. The UAP in it, they said it kind of looked like a rocket with some sort of plume behind it, flying about, 4,500 feet up. And the Chilean military, they looked at that footage for 2 full years. 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And even with all their resources, all their experts, they basically said, we cannot identify this at all. It just stayed anomalous. When a military with all its tech and smarts is stumped for that long, what does that really tell us?
Oh, it tells you a lot. When you've got highly trained military people, advanced equipment, and an official group like CIFA spending 2 years on it, and they still call it unidentified, well, that moves it beyond just someone misseeing something, doesn't it? It really underlines that these probably aren't just regular planes or weather balloons. It shows there's a real gap in our knowledge and something's operating in ways we don't understand with our current tech.
If you zoom out a bit, you see this openness sort of reflected culturally in South America too, right? Countries like Peru, Bolivia, Brazil, Uruguay. They seem more open-minded. Lots of sources point to UAPs being like part of their cultural heritage. Pre-Inca culture is talking about beings of light coming from the sky. It's almost woven into their history.
Exactly. And that's what's really fascinating, how that deep cultural background can actually shape a country's official view. When stories of things in the sky are part of your ancient myths, your traditions, it gives you a different way to look at modern sightings. It kind of removes some of that automatic skepticism, that stigma. It lets them be more open even at the government level because it's not seen as some fringe belief, but maybe a continuation of things people have talked about for ages. It's a huge contrast to places where those stories were, actively squashed or laughed at.
Right. Speaking of denial, let's switch gears to Japan.
Yeah.
For the longest time, their government was really, really skeptical. I mean, as recently as 2018, the Japanese government put out an official statement literally denying the existence of UFOs. Their defense departments just showed complete dismissal. But was that official line really what was happening? On the ground or I guess in the air?
No, not really. The official stance was often totally different from what pilots and military folks knew or were experiencing. There was this sort of quiet internal understanding that, yes, stuff was happening, but the culture was just stay silent. It's a classic situation where the official policy doesn't match the reality on the ground, where incidents were happening but not really getting reported up the chain in a way that led to action.
Exactly. Like we heard from Mamoru Saka, he was a former wing commander in Japan's self-defense force. He said he constantly heard stories from pilots, civilians too, about seeing UAPs, including these cigar-shaped objects that seem to be watching training exercises, often flying pretty high up. And pilots were specifically told, keep quiet. But everyone kind of knew. Sato even remembered one time where a student pilot in his fighter course actually lost control of his craft when they encountered one of these cigar-shaped objects. It was flying about 1,500 meters high, alarms going off. When you hear about pilots losing control and then being told don't talk about it, what does that suggest? About the object, sure, but also about the official reaction.
Well, it suggests something deeply worrying, doesn't it? Where the official way of handling it wasn't just denial, it was suppressing potentially dangerous encounters. A pilot losing control, alarms blaring. That points to some outside influence, some advanced tech that can mess with our planes. And the order to stay silent, that hints at maybe an organizational fear of panic maybe, or just deliberately trying to avoid admitting they couldn't explain or control something.
But then things just flipped dramatically.
Hmm.
September 2020, Japan's decades-long secrecy policy, gone. Defense Minister Taro Kono actually ordered the Japanese self-defense forces to make a visual recording of any encounter with an unexplained craft.
Right.
And apparently, this big public change came right after a meeting in August 2020 between Minister Kono and the U.S. Defense Secretary at the time, Mark Esper. Unidentified aerial phenomena was supposedly a key topic, and they agreed they needed to cooperate.
So how does a country go from total denial to actively investigating, cooperating on UAPs like that fast? What triggers that kind of pivot? That's a huge moment. And often it suggests that the sheer amount, maybe the credibility of the reports, possibly combined with bigger picture, geopolitical stuff, just made sticking to denial impossible. That meeting between Kono and Esper is definitely key. It suggests the U.S., which had already started its own public shift on UAPs, maybe shared some intel or some persuasive data, something that made Japan rethink its position. It stopped being just about what one pilot saw and became about, national security strategy, and maybe realizing no one country could figure this out alone.
And the implication is huge. Japan, this historically skeptical nation, doesn't just change course. They're now setting up a space operations squadron, partly to monitor this stuff. It really underlines this growing feeling that there clearly is something going on over the skies of Japan, and that governments are finally admitting there might be objects in our skies that are not of this Earth. If you step back, the bigger meaning here is massive, isn't it?
Absolutely. The wider implications are unmistakable. It points towards a global realization, even among the biggest skeptics, that there are things flying around that we can't just explain away easily. This shift from denial to actively looking into it and even working with other countries, it shows a real change in how these phenomena are being seen and handled at the very top. It tells us this is global, it's ongoing, and the implications, well, they're potentially huge.
Okay, so from policy changes, let's move into some really extraordinary encounters. Stories often wrapped in, secrecy and a lot of speculation. Let's get into the alleged experiences of Admiral Richard Byrd. Now, this guy was a big deal. Esteemed U.S. naval officer, explorer, famous for being one of the first to fly over both the North and South Poles. So August 1946, right after World War II, he leads Operation High Jump to Antarctica. And this was enormous, the biggest expedition ever there. 13 ships, 23 aircraft, over 4,700 military guys. Officially, the story was they were checking out sites for potential military bases. Standard stuff, right?
Seems like it on the surface.
But the really mind-blowing part of this story, it doesn't come from official reports. It comes from these alleged secret diaries, supposedly found by his son after he died and then, suppressed by the government. Now, for listeners who maybe haven't heard this one before, there's debate about these diaries, right? About whether they're real. Why do they still resonate so much, even with those questions?
Oh yeah, the authenticity of Byrd's secret diary is still hotly debated. Skeptics will point out, we don't have the original verified documents, and the timing of when they surfaced raises questions. But why they're still so powerful, I think it's because they fit perfectly with the feeling of that time, post-war. The dawn of the atomic age, this sense of government secrecy everywhere, and this fascination with hidden worlds. So whether they're definitively real or not, they've kind of become this foundational myth in UAP circles. They tap into that deep human wish to believe there's something more, something profound hidden just beneath what we know.
And what these diaries supposedly describe is just incredible. Byrd allegedly flew planes under the South Pole, under it, and found a place that just shouldn't be there, a temperate area, lush and green, basically under the Earth. I mean, imagine that. A hidden world thriving under the ice.
It immediately brings to mind all those ancient legends, right? Hollow Earth theories, myths of underground civilizations. For a serious explorer like Byrd to supposedly describe something like that, it just throws our whole map out the window. It opens up possibilities that science has mostly just dismissed. A warm zone under the pole. By everything we know scientifically, that's impossible, which is exactly why this story grabs you.
And then he supposedly sees this shimmering rainbow city made of crystal. His plane, he claims, gets taken control of, but these flying disc-shaped objects that guide him down gently. He's escorted into this huge cavern, meets a being he calls the Master in the diary. And this Master apparently says they're highly disappointed with what humans are doing with nuclear weapons, specifically mentioning Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They were concerned about what is going on the surface of the planet and hoped humanity would ultimately stop this.
Okay, the timing here. Right after WWII started the atomic age and this specific message about nukes, what do you make of that connection?
That connection is absolutely central, and it's a recurring theme in UAP research. The timing, right when the first atomic bombs go off and the modern UFO era kicks in. Many researchers don't see that as coincidence. We hear consistent reports, a high number of sightings near nuclear missile sites. There are even accounts from U.S. Air Force officers saying their nukes were actually disarmed by what are perceived to be extraterrestrial beings. So if a bird's diary is real, it suggests this profound concern from this, well, inner Earth intelligence about our path, especially our nuclear path. Like, they're watching and they're worried.
So let's just take this narrative seriously for a second. Highly respected explorer finds a hidden world, meets a master with a stark warning about what we're doing, and then he's allegedly shut down. Ordered to remain silent, taken to some government compound, told everything he says is classified. If true, what does that whole sequence imply? About hidden realities, maybe, and government control of information?
It implies, well, potentially a very advanced hidden intelligence operating in ways we can barely grasp, with a direct stake in humanity's future, especially our self-destructive tendencies, and the silencing part. That points to a deep fear within governments, maybe fear of losing control or fear of how society would react to such a reality-shattering truth. It suggests a huge, deliberate effort to manage the story, to keep the public from knowing about truly extraordinary possibilities.
Okay, let's shift to another really chilling story about suppression. This one involves Albert K. Bender in Bridgeport, Connecticut back in 1953. Bender had founded the International Flying Saucer Bureau. This was during that big UFO flap of 1952, when flying saucers were seen all over Washington, D.C. What was it about that 52 wave that made Bender feel he needed to start a whole research group?
Well, that 1952 D.C. flap was just unprecedented. It wasn't just one or two odd sightings. It was sustained visual and radar contacts over highly sensitive airspace. The Pentagon, the White House, it caused a public sensation, and it left this undeniable feeling that something was flying around with complete impunity. For Bender, it seems like it was a wake-up call, a clear sign that ordinary citizens needed to step up, collect info, share it, because the government was either silent or dismissive.
Right. And his group took off quickly. But just a year later, his research stops abruptly, prematurely. He claimed he came home one night and there were 3 dark, shadowy figures that just materialized through his wall into his bedroom. His description, wearing hats and overcoats. They had glowing eyes and they smelled like sulfur. And these figures, they apparently communicated telepathically, warning him flat out, discontinue his UFO research and stop publishing his magazine, The Space Review.
Yeah.
These descriptions of the men in black, they're weirdly consistent across different stories, aren't they?
Yeah.
The look, materializing, telepathy. What does that consistency suggest about who or what they might be?
It's truly fascinating, that consistency. It lends a certain weight to stories that might otherwise sound, well, unbelievable. Materializing through walls, glowing eyes, smell of sulfur. I mean, these aren't your typical G-men characteristics, are they? It strongly points towards something non-human, or at least something with abilities far beyond ours. Something that can break our known laws of physics to achieve its goal, which seems to be suppression.
And Bender got really sick after this. Didn't eat for days. He has said he was repeatedly visited, had headaches, felt like he was being controlled telepathically. He just gave up his research entirely. And these men in black, as he called them, they gave him a message he later shared. We come from a very, very far distant place. We have been coming and going from your planet for some time. We cannot allow you or anyone to interfere. And then this part. We have taken many humans from this planet to cover up our operations until we are done.
Wow. Yeah, that's a chilling message.
Now, pop culture usually shows them as government agents, right? But many researchers think there's something other than human. Maybe aliens or working for aliens. They supposedly have these odd quirks too, like not knowing basic things, how to use a pen or how to eat or drink normally if offered. How do those weird traits plus that direct message deepen the mystery around them and what they're trying to do?
Those quirks you mentioned, they're really important. They steer you away from thinking standard human agent and towards something, well, profoundly alien, maybe even artificial, or just totally unfamiliar with human ways. Combine that with their clear telepathic warning, don't interfere, and even mentioning abductions to cover up operations. It marks this really significant point in UFO history. It suggests it's not just denial, it's active, deliberate interference. Control, maybe, from some intelligence that sees our digging around as a problem. Some theories even link them to stuff like shadow people, maybe acting as, like, ringleaders to keep these secrets buried.
Okay, let's explore two more incidents now that really stretch the definition of unexplained. One hints at time travel, the other takes us to actual physical fragments of something unknown.
Right.
We're heading to Suffolk County, England, Rendlesham Forest, 1980, December 26th. Airman John Burroughs and his supervisor are doing a routine security check near a U.S. Air Force base, and they see some strange lights in the forest.
The classic start to many of these stories.
Right. But as they got closer, they said the air felt different, like electricity on our skin and hair. It got stronger, and it felt like everything was going in slow motion. Sergeant Peniston apparently saw this large craft, triangular in shape, black in color, maybe 6-7 feet high, and it had these unique pictorial-type glyphs on the side. Okay, reports of physical effects, time slowing down. That's way beyond just seeing something, isn't it? What does that suggest about these encounters?
Oh, it's deeply unsettling, absolutely. It goes way past just seeing something weird into something interactive, almost invasive. It suggests some really advanced tech that can not only show up physically, but maybe manipulate how we perceive time, affect our bodies directly, that electric feeling, the slow motion effect. It points to maybe a powerful energy field, perhaps part of its cloaking or propulsion, that directly impacted the witnesses physically. It really forces you to confront how truly strange and maybe multidimensional these events can be.
And then it gets even weirder. Peniston touches the craft.
Yeah.
He claims he gets this strange download of information straight into his mind. It compels him the next day to write down pages of zeros and ones, just binary code. Years later, someone, a computer programmer, translates it. And the message, exploration of humanity, continuous for planetary advance, eyes of your eyes, origin year 8100.
Wow.
Right. Origin year 8100. Expert that immediately makes you think, maybe not aliens from space, right? What kind of profound shift does that force on us if we're talking time travelers?
Yeah, that's where the whole story just becomes incredibly compelling and potentially paradigm shifting. If origin year 8100 means their origin, well, it completely reframes the whole conversation. It's not visitors from Alpha Centauri. It's potentially visitors from our own distant future. It suggests maybe not an alien species, but a future version of us, humans, coming back to watch, interact, maybe even intervene. That implies time isn't strictly linear, and the other we're encountering might actually be us, just later. It also makes that idea of correcting things sound really urgent, doesn't it?
And that idea, correcting things, is echoed by John Burroughs himself. Both he and Peniston had lasting physical problems, throat, eyes, gums turned white, vision issues. Doctors even asked if they'd been exposed to radiation. Plus, they had strange dreams. But after 1993, Burroughs starts having these dreams, nightmares really, where he felt he could see that these were time travelers 40 to 50,000 years in the future. And their purpose in coming back was to correct things, to fix things, because apparently something horrible has happened. He specifically said, I never had a feeling of it being extraterrestrial. It's always been that they were simply us in the future. I mean, that completely changes the why are they here question.
It absolutely does. It shifts from curiosity or exploration to perhaps desperation or intervention.
Okay, finally, let's jump to central New Mexico, October 2019. We're near the alleged Roswell crash site. Investigative journalists Linda Moulton Howe and Giorgio Tsoukalos, from Ancient Aliens, they met up with a geologist, Frank Kembler. They went to what's called the skip site, which, for you listening, is basically where one of the supposed UFOs from 1947 might have hit the ground, skipped, scattered debris before crashing finally somewhere else. And Professor Kembler, he's a local geologist. He'd spent almost a decade meticulously searching that area, using infrared metal detectors looking for scattered bits.
Dedication.
Seriously. And Kembler shows them more than a dozen metal fragments he'd found since 2011. Tiny little pieces, twisted and mangled, but somehow looking absolutely pristine after all that time. He highlights one fragment, magnesium zinc seismic, that had unique layers and banding. As a geologist, he's emphatic. I have never, ever seen anything like this.
Yeah.
Now, you're the expert here. Why is that specific composition, magnesium zinc seismic, with those layers? Why is that so weird from a scientific standpoint?
Okay, yeah, that's a crucial detail. While magnesium and zinc, those are normal elements, sure. But that term seismic, used like that, combined with these perfectly even, artificial-looking layers or bands inside the metal, that just doesn't happen in any known natural geological process or any normal way metals form or are made, at least conventionally. Nature doesn't stack elements up in such precise, engineered-looking layers. It really points towards advanced, deliberate manufacturing, not something you dig up naturally or find from a regular plane crash. It has the signature of something, well, intelligently designed, and not from around here.
So Giorgio, he's holding one of these fragments, and he's convinced. He feels he's holding something made by another intelligence from someplace we don't understand. He felt it was truly extraterrestrial. Then they actually go searching themselves in these hot spots Kimball identified along this sort of gouge in the earth. And within minutes, Giorgio gets a hit on the metal detector, finds this tiny little piece of wire, described as strange-looking, twisted and mangled. Linda finds another similar piece nearby.
Wow, that quickly.
Yeah. So what's the significance of finding these new pieces in these sort of runoff areas? Does it strengthen the case for physical evidence from 47?
Finding new pieces like that is incredibly important. Because those runoff areas are exactly where debris might have washed or settled, places the original military cleanup might have easily missed or couldn't access, the fact that they found more material fitting that same description, twisted, mangled, yet weirdly pristine, unusual wire, right alongside Kimbler's unique layered fragments, well, it provides corroborating physical evidence. It helps move the whole Roswell story away from just being stories people told towards something you can actually hold, test, analyze. It gives you actual materials that seem to defy normal explanations, potentially offering real data on unknown or non-earthly tech.
Man, what a journey we've covered today.
Yeah.
Seriously, we went from governments changing their whole tune on UAPs to alleged secret chats with beings inside the earth, these creepy men in black trying to shut people up.
Right.
Cryptic binary messages, possibly from time travelers, and then right down to literally digging in the dirt near Roswell and finding these weird metal bits. What all this really shows us, I think, is that the world, the reality we live in, it might be way more complex, way more intriguing than we usually think. Whether it's old cultures influencing modern policy in South America, or these chilling stories of people being silenced, or actual physical stuff science can't explain. The questions just keep piling up, don't they?
They really do. Every answer seems to lead to 10 more questions.
So here's something to maybe chew on as you go about your day. What if? What if the objects in our skies aren't always from distant stars? What if sometimes they're from, I don't know, a deeper past, a hidden world right here? Or even our own far, far future. If any of that is true, what does that mean for our place in the cosmos? Our whole understanding of time itself? And maybe the biggest question, how much more is still being kept from us? Or is maybe just so far beyond what we can grasp right now? We'll just leave that thought with you.